2021 was an interesting year for gaming. A lot of big AAA titles got bumped from their launch dates by months or even to the following year. This opened the door for more indie, new, or eccentric titles to shine. I know for me, I found myself searching out games that I maybe would have passed on in previous years or heaped on top of my ever-growing backlog. It was also a year I purchased a PlayStation 5 and managed to be one of the lucky few who found enough PC parts to cobble together a new gaming and editing rig. Between these two upgrades, I've enjoyed experiences and titles that might have been out of reach for me in 2020. Obviously, I can't cover everything, so I'm going to create 3 lists. This will prevent me from wandering too far into the weeds with diatribes on titles I probably won't remember or touch on again. The first list will be my top 5 games released in 2021. That is the only criteria for that list. The second list will be my top 5 games I played in 2021. This includes anything I played, regardless of whether it was released in 2021 or not. And the final list will be my top 5 most disappointing games I played in 2021. This doesn't mean I dislike the game necessarily, but it does mean I didn't get what I wanted out of it, or the expectations I had weren't satisfied. So, let's get to it. To begin, here are my top 5 games released in 2021. At number 5, I have Kena Bridge of Spirits. This gem is the debut title from Ember Lab, and they're making a very good first impression. The Pixar meets Zelda aesthetic gameplay combo plays just as good as it looks. The stories are heartfelt, although Kena is a little underdeveloped to my tastes, and the environments are stunning. Gameplay is part Zelda, part Dark Souls, and while I do think the difficulty spikes are not ideal, the combat is heading in the right direction overall. This is also a great family game that touches on deeper themes, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. It's an easy recommendation for those with kids or those wanting a mostly relaxing take on the action-adventure genre. Number 4 is Forza Horizon 5. This beauty is an open-world arcade racer. The player drives around the scenic landscapes of a fictional Mexico competing in races, launching off insane jumps, and cobbling together stupidly fast cars. It is really fun. For me, this is what I like to call an evergreen game. It's basically something that I'll keep installed for quite a long time and pick up in between games or when I have a spare half hour or so. Hop into a few races, unlock some cars, and move on to something else. Honestly, this game would be higher on the list if not for a few faults. First, the online multiplayer is rather abysmal. It can be difficult to team up with friends, and even though this has improved since launch, it's still not great. Second, the seasonal objectives and rewards are a mess to navigate. Most of the time, I don't even look at them because I honestly don't want to sift through all the different menus. I'm sure some people will think I'm crazy for not understanding it, but it is what it is. Coming at number 3 is Back 4 Blood. Now, if you asked me to include this in my top 5 when the game launched, I would have told you you're demented. But after several months of patches, I can confidently say this is one of my favorite multiplayer games. Back 4 Blood is a first-person shooter with the goal of completing certain objectives and then making it to a safe room. In typical zombie fashion, lots of living dead stand in your way and are ready to be mowed down by machine guns, sniper rifles, and barbed wire-covered bats. While the gameplay on the surface looks fairly standard, the preparation is anything but. Back 4 Blood implements a card system that acts a lot like skill trees in other games. The interesting thing about these cards is they can be combined in any way you want on any character class. This opens up the possibilities for different builds tremendously, and if you know me at all, you know I like my builds. This one mechanic, on top of all the great gunplay and song and dance of teamwork required at higher difficulties, means I can easily recommend this title. Sitting smugly at number 2 is Returnal. This PlayStation 5 exclusive is a wet dream of some of my favorite genres: roguelite, bullet hell, and third-person shooter. Oh, and the story is absolutely bonkers in the best kind of way. In the role of Celine, the player is tasked with traversing through various biomes in the hope of escaping an endless loop of suffering and death. It is challenging in the best possible ways, and the story will wrap its tentacles around you without ever revealing its true form. I can't sing enough praises about this title, and its lone fault upon release, the inability to save mid-run, has since been rectified with a patch. If you have a PlayStation 5, you should own this game, no question about it. I have 2 honorable mentions before we move on to the number 1. To begin, I have Inscryption. This indie title surprised a lot of people, myself included, with its excellent atmosphere, graphical stylings, and intriguing story. The gameplay is centered around traversing small maps, collecting cards, and battling those cards against the computer. I don't want to say much else. The game is very obtuse in presentation, and if I elucidate any of that, it would ruin the experience. Now, I have a little story about this one. I played roughly 17 hours of it and neared completion, but Steam, for whatever reason, decided to replace my cloud save with a really old autosave. That cloud saved became the default and was then downloaded over my current save at the time. Needless to say, I lost all of my progress except for the first 2 hours. I have not touched the game since. But, despite that, I'm very comfortable placing it just outside the top 5. I have a feeling it would be higher if I finished it, and I do plan on playing from the beginning sometime this year. I need my wounds inflicted by Steam to heal a little bit. My second honorable mention is Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. I'm not entirely sure how to talk about this game without spoiling the heck out of it, so the most I will say is the game is not what it seems to be. There are some truly shocking and heartfelt scenes in this edition of Doki Doki Literature Club. I'd put it in my top 5, but it doesn't seem right considering how many great games came out this year, and Doki Doki Literature Club Plus is a re-release of a game made in 2017 with some extras thrown in. Alright, and finally, at number 1 is Wildermyth. I feel this game is underappreciated and still flies under people's radars. It is essentially a tabletop RPG with tactical combat. But if it was just that, I don't think it would be anything special. What sets it apart is the way it interweaves random stories and the characters the player creates or stumbles across. Stories appeared based on who was in the party and the location they are occupying. A different party in the same location will generate a different story. Likewise, characters can interact with those in the group. They may fall in love and have children, or they may form lifelong rivalries. The options are plentiful and often unexpected. To pair with this is the legacy system, which allows characters who retire or survive a campaign the ability to continue into other stories. They will maintain bonds they formed, transformations that occurred, and the gear they equipped. The legacy system allows the bonds a player formed with the characters to continue. I have heroes that survived numerous campaigns, and I make decisions that protect them simply because I've grown attached to who they are. To top all that off, Wildermyth has a surprisingly deep tactics game at its core. It's not the most complicated or unforgiving, although it definitely can be at higher difficulties, but it does provide an amazing amount of freedom on developing characters and teams. Again, build diversity for the win. I can't recommend this hidden gem enough, and I really hope the devs keep growing the game. I'll gladly buy any DLC they make, and if they decide to make another game, it will be a day one purchase for me. Alright, list number 1 down. Any surprises in there? Let me know what your top 5 are in the comments. We're just about to jump into list number 2, and just as a reminder, the games that are in this list I only had to play last year. They didn't need to be released last year. Okay, at number 5 is Back 4 Blood, and I'm not going to go over this game again, so moving on. At number 4 is Returnal. Again, I'm not going to go over it. Number 3 is Yakuza Like a Dragon. The Yakuza series took a huge risk switching from real-time combat to a turn-based JRPG, but in my opinion, it paid off in spades. I did a gigantic review on this beast of a game, but I'll do my best to summarize. In YLAD, the player is in control of Ichiban Kasuga. He is someone who wears his heart on his sleeve and won't back down when he feels an injustice is performed. He's the type of person you want in your corner, but hate to see on the other side. His character arc, as well as all the other wonderful people in his party, is the soul of YLAD. Their journey from the bottom to the top is filled with twists and turns. Several moments made me tear up from grief and joy, and others made me yell at my TV in disbelief and anger. This game is brimming with drama in the best possible way. I looked forward to the main storyline in a way I haven't experienced in a JRPG since the late 90s. As is tradition with Yakuza titles, there's a ton of stuff to do in case the battle system starts to bore you, which it will. See, combat is the weakest piece of this puzzle, and while it isn't horrible, it doesn't creep much beyond average. But honestly, the story alone is enough for me. I loved hanging out with Ichiban and the gang, and I honestly can't wait for Yakuza Like a Dragon 2. It isn't often I plunge toward the 100-hour mark in a game, but I came pretty damn close with this one. Now, I do have an honorable mention for this list. Remnant from the Ashes is a criminally underrated title. It combines third-person shooter, roguelite, and Soulsborne into a very polished package. Throw in the 2 DLCs and you got a recipe for dozens of hours of gameplay. Remnant was a staple for my weekly gaming group for quite some time as we slowly devour the different areas and bosses. There are a lot of different builds to be had, and the challenges presented are nothing to scoff at. I really hope a sequel to this one is in the works. Sitting at number 2 is Wildermyth. Oh, did I surprise you with that one perhaps? You were probably expecting it to be number 1, so what could be number 1? At number 1, we have Risk of Rain 2. So, to be fair to the others on the list, I did start playing Risk of Rain 2 in 2020, but the thing is, I didn't stop playing pretty much all through 2021. I've poured hundreds of hours into this, and I'm still not tired of it. So, what is this game about? Risk is a roguelite. Pick a class, drop into the first level, kill monsters, collect loot, beat the boss, move on to the next level, rinse and repeat until you feel like stopping by defeating the final boss, self-destructing, dying, quitting, facing off against a hidden boss, or by soft-locking the game because there's too much going on. That last one might need some explaining. Risk is built around power fantasy, and I mean, that's not particularly unique, a lot of games are built around that way. But this game wants you to feel stupidly strong. It wants you to make builds that allow the game to play itself. It wants you to stack so many items that your system has to break frame rates, or stop putting enemies in levels, or freak out and place your character in no man's land. In any other game, these actions sound like bugs, but here they are features. Risk of Rain 2 never says, no, you can't do that. Risk of Rain 2 asks you to do it. It wants you to stack an absurd amount of items and feel like an omnipotent god. But you have to earn it. That right there is why I love this game. You have to earn it. Most runs will be failures. That's nothing due to roguelites, but unlike say Dead Cells or FTL, when a player gets on a good run in Risk of Rain 2, it has the potential to go forever. It has the potential to spiral out of control in a wondrous cacophony of explosions and AoEs and missiles and voodoo dolls and lightning strikes. Anyway, Risk of Rain 2 is really, really good and really, really fun. I can't recommend it enough, and a new DLC will be dropping very soon. I'm looking forward to that. And one last thing I want to say about this game, it's excellent for co-op as well, which gives it a leg up on other well-known games in this genre, again, like Dead Cells, FTL, etc. Okay, we're into the home stretch. Now let's chat about disappointment. These games are ranked based on the least to most disappointing. Coming in at number 5 is Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and it's primarily here because of Insomniac Studios' history as an amazing developer. I definitely think Rift Apart is a good game, but considering its presentation and how heavily it was advertised, I can't help but feel like there should have been more. The guns weren't quite as wacky as I wanted, the combat breezed without a hiccup, and when it finished, I had no desire to return to it. Again, this is a good game, and I do recommend it. I just thought there'd be pretty much more of everything offered. Ratchet's pedigree kinda worked against it in this latest iteration. Warping into number 4 is Control. I played this early in the year and immediately I was hooked, but this didn't last. Like I stated in my review, Control's early hours are some of the best in gaming. The issues start to crop up as the player progresses though. Most of my disappointment stems from the story's shortcomings, which I'm not going to go over here. I know there is DLC, and from what I can tell, the DLC does help the storyline, but I can't help but feel like Remedy made a promise that it simply couldn't keep. I don't know if ambition lost pace with the constraints of game development, or if the writers and myself simply disagree on what made the introduction to Jesse's world so interesting. This game is less than the sum of its parts, but like Rift Apart, I can easily recommend it despite its flaws. Number 3 is The Ascent. I tracked this game for some time leading into its release, and I thought I'd finally found something to hold me over until more build-centric games like Back 4 Blood and Wonderlands arrived. And I'm sure that game exists in The Ascent, somewhere, beneath all the bugs and quality of life issues. See, Ascent's problem is it was released with some bugs. Nothing new in this era of gaming, but what sets it apart is the severity of the problems. The Ascent contains game-breaking bugs. I tried 3 separate times to progress, both with and without other players, and each time my game got soft-locked out of mission progression. I wanted to play this game. I wanted to enjoy it, and frankly, I did enjoy what I played, but I simply can't excuse this level of quality. This doesn't even factor in how difficult it was for me to matchmake with my friends. Maybe I'll come back to this game to see how it's doing, but unfortunately, with the volume of high-quality games released every year and my very limited time to play them, I just don't see how this one is making it back into rotation. Okay. I'll probably be crucified for this one, but number 2 is Hades. Now, before people go off, I want to make it clear that I'm not saying Hades is a bad game. I simply found it to be very disappointing. Obviously, when this game came out, it received pretty much universal acclaim for its story, presentation, and combat. I'm a big fan of Supergiant games. Transistor is one of my all-time favorites, but Hades missed the mark for me. I'm going to cover my reasons for why I stopped playing, because if I don't explain myself to some degree, people just think I'm hating on it just because. Now, I've spent approximately 6 hours with Hades, and I've not gone back since. If your thought process to anything I say is you didn't play long enough to reach XYZ plot point or some progression system, I only have one thing to say. I don't care. For me, I played enough to know I didn't want to go any further, and that is why I felt supremely let down by this game. I expected all the praises it received to be true, and my own personal expectations as a fan of Supergiants to be fulfilled. Neither of these things happened for me. My main issues are as follows. The story did not intrigue in any meaningful way. The presentation felt cluttered, especially when a lot is going on. The progression system felt like a grind from the very beginning, and the combat did not feel all that different from other games I've played, including Bastion, which is Supergiant's first game. To briefly elaborate on each point, the story is often praised for its delivery as well as content. I found the delivery just too slow, and the characters kinda predictable. I love their designs and voiceover work, but that's about it. I'm sure super fans of the game will say I'm crazy because I didn't even finish one escape, but my point still stands. I didn't find the story interesting in the 6 hours I played. Why would I want to spend more time to know more? I did not enjoy Hades' art style in combat, especially when the screen had a lot going on. Clarity is the biggest problem. Compared to other games using the same isometric view, Hades feels cluttered with style rather than substance. When I play something like Diablo or A Curse of the Dead Gods, I can very easily read the screen and know what's happening because the enemies, spells, attacks, and backgrounds work toward the goal of clarity. Hades reads like an artist's wet dream with very little constraint. It often reminded me of late game antics in Risk of Rain 2, where the screen is a cluster of unicorn vomit. The progression system, well, frankly, I hated it, pretty much from the start. Grinding for separate currencies is not fun to me, ever. And never will be. And Hades asked for multiple. I found the different weapons interesting, but again, I had no desire to grind out currency to enhance them. I wanted to hear more stories from characters, but again, didn't want to invest the time in grinding out for yet another currency. It all felt very lazy, if I'm being honest. Again, maybe there's more to it, but after 6 hours, I'd seen enough. Finally, combat. It wasn't bad by any means, but it was not the groundbreaking system I was led to believe by review outlets, YouTubers, and user reviews. It is functional and responsive, but not more so than other games I've played. I suppose the reason I found it so disappointing, besides all the hype, is it didn't really feel all that different from Bastion. Yes, I know they are different. What I mean is, considering the length of time between Bastion and Hades, I guess I just expected more growth. Instead, I got a pretty good combat system that doesn't do anything particularly special. I suppose that is a symptom of having played a lot of great games, but I didn't feel the freedom of expression that I got in the early hours of other games like Dead Cells, Risk of Rain 2, FTL, or a myriad of other roguelikes. I know this section was long, but I wanted to be clear considering how praised this game is. I don't think it's bad, but there's no chance I'll be coming back to it. If it's your jam, great. It's not for me. So now you must be thinking, what the hell could be more disappointing than Hades at this point? Number 1, Outriders. What makes Outriders so disappointing to me is the advertising campaign leading up to its release convinced me that Outriders would be a looter-shooter paradise. I saw the potential of numerous builds, in-game activities, set up from the start, and an interesting storyline to boot. But when I tried it, I wasn't just disappointed. I was sick. Literally. The movement, shaky cam, and motion blur made me nauseous and gave me a headache almost immediately upon boot. I persevered through the pain to see what it was all about because promises were made by the devs to correct those problems. Strange graphical issues and seemingly arbitrary booting screens made me question the quality left and right, but I chalked that up to a new AAA release, as sad as that statement is. But none of this is what disappointed me the most. No, the majority of that disappointment stemmed from the actual gameplay. The shooting felt awkward, like my character moved through gelatin. The aim acceleration was atrocious. Gunplay, the most fundamental aspect of Outriders, did not feel satisfying. Movement also felt strange. I can't quite put my finger on it, but compared to the staples of other third-person shooters such as Gears of War, Outriders lacked precision. Coupled with the poor gunplay and the basics were just not adding up. Above all these gameplay issues, the mission structure is what made me stop playing. The levels sprawled haphazardly, covers sprinkled with no rhyme or reason. The spaces didn't seem lived in, rather they felt crafted specifically for the player. This failure of immersion compounded when it became evident the mission would be a series of go here, kill that, get loot, without any consideration for the scale, placement, or potency of its design. Run into arena, kill things, move to the next arena. I know a lot of looter shooters behave this way, but games like Destiny or Borderlands do a much better job integrating these arenas into an area or open world. I never got the sense the places my Outrider visited were once occupied areas, that humanity truly wanted to live in this now hostile location. When all of this adds up, I'm left feeling empty. What made this all worse is I heard and read about how great the loot and build diversity was for those pushing through the shortcomings. I was never going to see the game Outriders could have been for me. Perhaps in a sequel I'll get the game my brain designed, but in the meantime, Outriders stands as a reminder of how difficult it is to balance the many aspects that go into a looter shooter. Whew, okay, that's everything I got for this video. Anything surprise you, or was it kind of what you expected? What was your favorites from 2021? What was your most disappointing from 2021? Let me know in the comments. If you like what I'm doing, please consider giving me a like and subscribing to my channel. It really helps out. I try to put out a video at least once a month going in-depth on games I find interesting. I hope everyone is doing well. Have yourself a good one.